Hello, it's Big Cheds. I'm back with another chapter of My Battles with Cancer, a patient and caregiver's candid memoir. I published this book back in 2020 and I republished it in 2023 and just recently released the full audiobook on Audible. I'm a cancer survivor and I was also a caregiver for my mother who had cancer. And I wrote about my experience so it would help other people. I want the book to be for free and available to anybody. That's why I'm doing this video series here on YouTube at Cheds Trading. I've also published two other books, Trading Wisdom and Trading Quotes. I am, of course, Big Cheds on Twitter. That's probably where you know me from. Last time we did the chapter, did you just say radiation? And now we're doing the chapter, Starting Radiation. And we're almost through the first third of the book, Starting Radiation. I had my chemo, and then I had the scan showing there was still some evidence of residual disease or the chance that it would come back. So they recommended that I have radiation. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're talking about today. So starting radiation. The following day, armed with a new plan, I decided to update my followers. Quote, starting 3 weeks of radiation therapy tomorrow. Today is one of those YOLO days. May 9th, 2018 at Big Cheds. One of my followers had some particularly kind words to say in advance of my first radiation session. Quote, Ched, I went through 6 weeks of radiation. Chemo is worse. With this treatment, you're in and out within 10 minutes. The only side effect is that it makes you tired. You are doing good. All the best at Crypto Melb. Thanks, buddy. 2 days later, the waiting was over, and I had no choice but to face my new quote-unquote treatment, whether I liked it or not. Thursday afternoon, I drove into the hospital, and after changing into a hospital gown and scanning my ID card, I sat down in the waiting area, and I did my best to relax before my appointment began. It was clear that I was both nervous and scared about what the radiation would actually feel like. So I reminded myself that I had no choice but to go forward with it. Next, I closed my eyes and began a brief meditation, hoping to summon up some courage to soothe my body and soul a little bit. This brief mental respite helped, and after a few minutes of waiting, my name was called. There were two wide wooden doors next to the receptionist desk that had caught my attention earlier while I was waiting. And from time to time, I observed various staff members walking up to those doors, scanning their ID badges, and then going through. While waiting, I had thought long and hard about those doors and how on this side were normal, healthy people, and on the other side of those doors were sick folks. People who were sick patients undergoing treatment from those strange radiation machines. Everything on the other side of that door was scary, dangerous, and unknown to me. In my mind, this truly was a portal between two worlds. Now that I was following the technician through those doors, I had passed the point of no return and would be entering this scary new world. As I laid down on the table, the technicians again asked me what kind of music I wanted to listen to, and this time I replied, classical music. They explained that the first session would be longer than normal as they were still calibrating the computer software for my exact measurements. The technicians emphasized that it was critically important for them to go slowly to make sure the radiation went precisely where the doctor intended. Once I was in a good position, the technicians let me know that they were able to start the radiation therapy procedure, and they instructed me not to move. They walked out of the room, and I took a deep breath to center myself, hoping to remain as still as a statue. Moments later, I watched this futuristic looking set of machinery rotating around on an axis around the table, and I just laid there helpless, waiting to receive my first dose of radiation. When the machine stopped moving, an x-ray was taken, and then the technicians announced that they were coming back into the room to adjust my body. As they continued to adjust my body, I studied everything I could see without moving my head, torso, or legs, closely examining the shape and curves of the X ray and radiation machines circling around me. I marveled at what seemed like futuristic technology. The X ray machine had a square panel with a basic glass surface and cloudy gray paneling around the edges. The, the radiation machine itself was a large circular disc shaped apparatus with a dark interior and charcoal gray lead plates lined up one after another. Attached to it were pivoting arms that extended or retracted depending on which scanner the machine was using. The scanning machines themselves were also large rectangular boxes, one of them looking closer to a square than a rectangle. These machines seemed to be working together to try to find the precise angle to deliver that radiation to my body. It was clear to me that I was going to be spending a lot of time laying on my back, so I planned on making the most of it by studying everything within my visual range. I noticed laser beams that ran the full length of the ceiling and then down to the side walls to connect with my torso. And the technicians used those lasers to line up with the tattoos on my body. I also spotted two signs in the room with the word X-ray on them. These signs would light up and emit a sound when the machine was active. That sound could be described as a loud and vibratory industrial type noise that reminded me of a construction truck backing up. Once the technicians had me in the desired position, the machinery kicked into a new gear and the arms pivoted around to retract the scanning equipment. Next, that large round disc rotated around me before settling into its starting position. The technician had explained to me that this particular machine was programmed in such a way as to administer the radiation from several different angles rather than just one, and that technique had been shown to reduce the severity of the side effects to the skin. After a brief pause, I heard that sound again and I saw the X-ray sign light up as the machine scanned my body one more time to make sure I was in the right place. This time, the sound and light lasted longer than it had before. A good 8 seconds elapsed, and then I heard a more curious tune that was new to my ears. From the massive disc-shaped radiation-delivering apparatus came a strange sound. It was the combination of greasy machine gears slowly grinding and a car engine failing to start as the driver repeatedly turned the key. I think it will be hard to ever forget that sound. The dance continued, and I tuned my ear towards the classical music as those lead plates moved around inside the machine, aligning in a particular formation so as to deliver the radiation to a specific area of my body. A few moments later, the large disc resumed its orbit and then passed right by my face before settling into position next to my right shoulder. I felt trapped, scared, and helpless as the gravity of the moment hit me. The experience served to completely overwhelm me with emotion, and I began a deep cry. My bravery and bravado faded away, leaving only a frail and vulnerable patient once more. My favorite music, Baroque classical, was playing in the background, and that music helped to enhance the power of the emotions I was feeling while afraid to move even an inch. The tears slowly dripped down my cheeks. Baroque classical has always been an important genre of music to me, and it has the ability to draw out and amplify my emotions, as it did here during this harrowing moment. Crying is a great way to let out those complex emotions that we sometimes keep deep inside and try to ignore. By crying, I was allowing myself to recognize the genuine nature of my emotions. I was attempting to deal with them head on, diving right in. I've always believed that it is important to face your feelings in the moment so that you can pass through them and then reach a place of greater wisdom and understanding. In addition, when you are closest to the moment that caused those emotions, you are better prepared to deal with them honestly. With time, it's easy to lie to yourself and change the elements of a story to suit your bias. And that way, you can avoid dealing with difficult emotions. That is why I believe in facing the emotion right away and head on. Quote, I love how they call chemo and radiation therapy. It's not like I'm getting a massage and my nails done here. May 11th, 2018 at Big Cheds, trying to have a little bit of fun with it, right? The treatment continued as the large radiation disc shaped machine methodically moved around to deliver the remaining dose to my shoulder area. Once the machine completed its pre scheduled movements, I heard a creak from the door opening, and the technicians walked in to adjust the table for the second half of my appointment. The process began once again as the technicians worked to adjust the perfect position for my body. After each attempt to properly align my body, they walked out of the door, and then I would hear that brief sound of the x ray machine coming on as that sign lit up. What I deduced was that on the other side of that door and nestled back in their workstation, these technicians were looking at the computer screen to see if everything was lined up correctly. If I was not precisely where they wanted me to be, they would re enter the room and adjust my body and then take a new x ray. This dance between myself and the technicians continued until I was positioned just right for the machine to deliver the radiation. For this visit, it took 6 adjustments. In all fairness, I really appreciated the care they took in making sure everything was perfect, as I was in no hurry to have those strange particles go anywhere that they were not intended. The administration of the radiation to my left shoulder area hadn't caused me any pain, so I didn't fear the radiation to my abdomen area as much as I had before starting the procedure. That made the second half of the appointment more bearable emotionally. The treatment continued, and as it did, I again studied all the machinery rotating around me, searching for meaning while wondering how I had found myself in such a predicament. After about 20 minutes had passed, the second half of my appointment was finished. I thanked the technicians for their help before returning to the dressing room to put my street clothes back on. As I stood there, I stared at the mirror for quite a while, examining my feelings and probing my soul to see if anything had changed. Now, I was like all those people on the other side of the wooden doors, in that realm of scary particles and radiation. I poked around at my body and I realized that I couldn't detect any physical pain, nor was I feeling any differently than I had when I walked into the hospital that morning. Reminding myself that this would be a cumulative process, I took a deep breath. After having one session under my belt, I was now better prepared for the remaining 14 sessions. That evening, when I got home, I realized that I was actually quite exhausted, and I spent most of the rest of the day in bed, decompressing. That was my way to let everything that had happened to me slowly settle in to my brain for later processing. The level of fatigue I was feeling in that moment was overwhelming. I kept telling my wife that I could not believe how exhausted I was as we continued to monitor me for side effects from the radiation. There was no physical pain to speak of, but rather a deep fatigue brought on, I believed, by the emotional roller coaster I had been on over the prior few weeks. As I laid in bed that night, I thought a lot about mortality. I thought about what I had accomplished in my life and what I had yet to accomplish. I wondered what people would say about me if I passed away from the cancer. And I also tried to figure out what I had done to end up in such a position. Again, entertaining the myth that I was still in control of my health. This process led me to feelings of shame, which in retrospect is to be expected given how defective I felt and understandable considering that I continued to blame myself for getting cancer. It was hard for me to let go of that voice inside of me that believed I was in full control of my destiny and maybe could have made different life choices to avoid getting cancer. Later that evening, after my daughter went to bed, I took some more time for myself, listening to music in my man cave as the rain poured down outside. I can still remember it today. The night before, I had a similar type of experience, sitting in my man cave and listening to music while trying to prepare myself for that first radiation therapy session. This time, however, everything felt different than it had been before, as I was a diminished man. I had been violated, and I was left feeling disoriented from the day's activities. Most of all, I wondered if I was ever going to be the same again. That being said, I realized that these feelings were a normal part of sorting out what this radiation thing really meant. Quote, radiation, especially 2 gray per session, is much easier than chemotherapy, but I am tired. May 10th, 2018 at Big Cheds. By the 4th radiation session, getting to the hospital and going through treatment was starting to feel routine. As time went on, I made an effort to become friendly with the technicians, knowing that I was going to be seeing them almost every day for the next 2 weeks. When we met, I tried to remember their names and ask them some basic questions to break the ice, believing that getting to know each other would make for a smoother course of radiation treatment. In my opinion, there had to be at least a basic level of familiarity with one another for the operation to proceed effectively. I believed this given just how much patient-technician interaction was required to properly administer that radiation treatment. Each session, the machine would work its way around my body. First, with an x-ray to find the correct position, and then with that large radiation disc and sliding gray bars that made those grinding sounds. Studying the exact sequence that the machine went through each time made me feel a little bit more comfortable. Familiarity with the process rendered it more predictable and, in some ways, easier to feel like I was in control. These radiation sessions offered me plenty of time to study and memorize those movements. Each time, once the shoulder area treatment was complete, the technicians moved on to the abdomen area and fired up the machine one more time. After just a few appointments, I had learned exactly when the shoulder process was about to end, and that way I could relax my body and take a moment to gather myself mentally before the technicians came back into the room to adjust my body. In addition, by the 4th visit, I had somewhat adapted my mental experience to an almost semi-meditative state. And this way I could pass the time more comfortably while they administered the radiation treatment. Before my 5th radiation session began, something exciting happened. While I was sitting in the waiting area, a male patient walked out of the treatment room and through those big wooden doors with a big, broad smile on his grisly face. This man, perhaps 15 years my elder, with brown hair and dark eyes, this man was flanked by 4 technicians who escorted him over to the front desk. Waiting for him there was a small wooden mallet and a gong. He enthusiastically grabbed that mallet and rang that gong, resulting in loud cheers from the technicians and the front desk staff. I was sitting just 10 feet away in the waiting area, and I was reminded of the celebration after my final chemotherapy session. A sense of accomplishment washed over me as I reflected back on my 6 sessions of chemotherapy and proudly remembered ringing that gong. Watching this man ring his gong, I realized that I would be participating in that exact ceremony one day soon. And that gave me comfort and a wonderful boost of patience. This is starting radiation. The next chapter is halfway home again. This is My Battles with Cancer, a patient and caregiver's candid memoir. I am and I was a patient and a caregiver. I had lymphoma. I'm a survivor now. My mother had cancer. I wrote this book to help myself, but also to help other people. And I published it in 2020, republished it in 2023, after publishing 2 more books, Trading Wisdom, Trading Quotes, all available on Amazon. But I rewrote this book to kind of update it and to just to give it the attention it deserved. And then I recorded the audiobook. You can listen to the entire book on Audible, and then soon here for free on YouTube. So that's what this is. I'm doing the whole book for free on YouTube. I want it to be available to everybody, and that's the mission. That's why we're doing this. So I'm, of course, Big Cheds on Twitter and Cheds Trading on YouTube. And thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.